welcome to my James Bond journey. So, I've seen a lot of movies, and a lot of my favorite movies, especially in the action and spy genre, are often compared to James Bond movies. And I know the tropes and the character archetypes associated with the Bond franchise, and they sound like things I'd enjoy. But I'm a completionist when it comes to film franchises, and I never grew up with them. You know, something like the MCU, which has a similar amount of movies, I grew up with those as they came out. I remember a world without the MCU, whereas Bond, the first Bond film, came out a couple years before my dad was even born, let alone me. My family was never very into them either, so I just never got around to watching them, and I never wanted to necessarily go out and see the Daniel Craig ones because of the completionist inside of me. And I know they're not interconnected as much as like the MCU or anything, but it's just, I don't know. I just never got around to watching them outside of a couple of the Sean Connery films I've seen before. Today we're going to be talking about the first James Bond movie, that is 1962's Dr. No, starring Sean Connery, Bond himself. And so, first of all, let's talk about the action. You know, for 60s, it's all right. It's not terrible. You know, I'm a fan of samurai films, and I think in terms of the more combating type of action, this doesn't do quite as well as some of those. And I've seen quite a few of westerns and Steve McQueen films, and I don't think it's necessarily the best quality from this film, but it's doable enough. It's not terrible. Moving on to the acting and the characters, Sean Connery gives what you'd expect from a Bond performance. He doesn't do a terrible job, and you know, he's charming, cheesy, looks the part, sounds the part, gives a good performance. I think one of the standout non-Connerys actors in the film would be Joseph Wiseman, the guy who plays Dr. No. I think he gives a good performance. He feels threatening at times. Even though I do think in the final act, when they're in the nuclear countdown, I think is told a little monotonish. But for the most part, he comes off threatening. He has a nice presence to him. And then Ursula Andress, she's the actress who played Honey Rider in the movie. Her performance, it's not the worst performance out there, and it's good enough to keep the plot going. It's good enough to keep you entertained, you know. And as far as the characters, there's not much backstory to any of them, but I don't necessarily think it's entirely needed. It helps, obviously, but it's not entirely needed. Moving on to the visuals, I think this is one of the aspects where the film particularly shines. The production design, especially when you get into the third act and you get into Dr. No's lair, it's very well done, and it's very well shot. And the lighting they used with the shadows and everything, it worked great. It added a nice tone to the film. And then you get stuff like the spiral looking vent that he climbs through, that Bond climbs through. The style, the look of all of that, it's very well done. And then another thing that was weird, because this is one of the Bond films I had seen before. I saw it earlier this year, in preparation of No Time to Die, but then, you know, stuff happened in 2020. But when I first watched it, I remember vividly seeing like a boom or a boom operator or something in one of the shots. This time around, I didn't see that. I don't know if I missed it this time, if I'm imagining it before. But I even couldn't find it when I tried to fast rewind. I didn't really see it either. But for some reason, I have the memory of seeing that. Now on to the story and the plot elements. There's not much to it. It's fine. You know, there's nothing terrible about it. It's not too many plot holes that I could figure out. It's pretty straightforward, you know. But there's not much depth to any of the characters at all. and that kind of does hold it back a little bit, but characters don't always require depth as long as they're interesting, and I think Sean Connery brings a good, interesting performance for that character. Same goes for the Dr. No and the actor that portrayed him. Alright, now the pacing is pretty good once you get about halfway through and you get onto the island and you get into the third act with Dr. No's lair. All that's paced pretty well for the most part. Beginning of the film, it's paced a little slow for the most part. But then, and back to the third act, when you get into the countdown scene towards the end, it feels off pace compared to the rest of the third act, to me anyway. And then the ending as well feels a little anticlimactic to me. Not necessarily when the facility blows up or anything, that's fine, that's great. But the way they took care of Dr. No specifically, it just felt anticlimactic to me, personally. All right, on to maybe the brightest spot, or one of the brightest spots, along with the visuals, is the sound and the sound design. You know, obviously you have the iconic James Bond sound and scores, you know, but there's a scene that I wanted to talk about it in the sound section of the review, but that's the scene where there's a tarantula basically on his bed that was planted there by one of the villains. And first of all, tarantulas is one of my biggest fears, but so that kind of helped with the tension in that scene. But particularly when he flicks it off the bed and he goes to smash it, the sound, like the beat of the score goes along with his smashing, and it doesn't feel necessarily like it was like choreographed, even though it might have been. It didn't feel like it was it wasn't like Baby Driver, for instance, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, don't get me wrong. But at times there, it feels like stuff is purposefully being shot at a specific rhythm. This time it just felt like he was naturally smashing it, and it just happened to go along with the music. And I love things like that. On to the rating. Dr. No it's a decent enough 60s spy action thriller from the 60s. I don't think it's necessarily the greatest action out there from that time period or anything. And the production design and the visuals and the score and the sound are the brightest spots, whereas I think the depth and the characters are some of the weaker aspects of the film. Then action's just kind of in the middle. I'm not going to take off too much for that. But I think overall, I would give it probably a 3 stars out of 5. Sounds about fair to me. And yeah. Thanks for watching the first review in my James Bond journey. And if you liked it, if you like me, hit the thumbs up. And if you want to see more, I posted a review for Tenet a couple days ago, which has some Bond elements to it as well. So just, if you want to join me for the future Bond reviews or any other reviews or rankings I put out there, I plan on doing a Christopher Nolan ranking this week. Then I'll have From Russia with Love out later in the week, hopefully. You know, I'm new to this whole YouTube thing. I'm going to try to get them out. And so, if you want to hear more, see more, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, comment your thoughts on Dr. No, and respect people's opinion.